As a Bitcoin maximalist, I've been telling people for years to withdraw their Bitcoin from the exchange into self-custody, hold their own private keys, run a node, but I've also got a will. And to some, that might sound like a contradiction, but it's not. I know what a lot of Bitcoin maxis think about having a will. They look at it as paperwork, lawyers, courts, probate, and none of these people understand Bitcoin. That's for sure. And there's also concerns around surveillance, legitimate concerns. In this video, I'll be sharing why I, as a Bitcoin maxi, have a will and actually think it's the most sovereign move you can make. And that might sound strange, but stick with me.
You don't have a will. You don't have a legally binding document that says, this is what I want to happen with my Bitcoin. So if you were to die, what would happen? The courts would default to the laws of intestacy wherever you happen to live at the time, and your assets would then be distributed to your next of kin, irrespective of what your actual wishes might be. If, for example, you did not have a spouse and you just had a brother and a sister, but you weren't talking to your brother, the courts wouldn't care. Your brother would get a share of your Bitcoin, irrespective of what you wanted. That's why you need to have a will. It's not going to say how you get access to the Bitcoin. That needs to be done separately. But it should say who gets what. Your will is a legal container, not a technical one. And what I mean by that is your will effectively says, this is how I want my assets distributed. This is who I want to get my stuff. It doesn't say how to access your Bitcoin. That's a completely separate issue. You should never, in fact, put your seed phrase or passphrase or anything resembling Bitcoin private key material in your will, because of course a will becomes a public document during probate. And so anybody who gets access to your will once you're dead will de facto have access to your Bitcoin. I'll share in a separate video about how you can go about separating the legal and the technical information that you need to convey to your loved ones. But the short version is that a will plus a letter of wishes should direct where your technical access documentation is, and your technical access documentation needs to have sufficient detail so that the person you've appointed to administer your estate without you, your executor or your trustee, that person needs to be able to access your Bitcoin. The best way to think about a will is not as a submission to the state's authority. I actually think it is the single most sovereign thing you can do before you die to ensure that you get to decide what happens to your Bitcoin. Your intentions for your Bitcoin can be fulfilled and not determined by a rigid formula determined by the state that may or may not even align with what you actually want to happen. If this has got you thinking, the best place to start is to go to mybitcoinwill.com. You can do a free Bitcoin inheritance stress test. It'll identify the gaps in your setup and tell you exactly what to do next.